Welcome to County Fair on Waycross Community Media. I'm Government Programming Coordinator Dana Gagnon, and today, as we are nearly to Election Day, we have with us Hamilton County Board of Elections Director Sherry Poland. Thank you so much, Sherry, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to talk about some of the ins and outs of making sure that you can vote this week. We are right down to the wire with 1 week left until Election Day. So I want to make sure we cover some of the details on what you have done to make that go smoothly and what voters need to know when they get there. Let's start with, you have made some changes this year for the first time on how early voting is set up to make things go more quickly. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, we were very excited to be able to lease additional space. It's on the same campus of the Board of Elections, so voters should still come to 4700 Smith Road. We have lots of traffic officers here directing the voters where to go on campus, as well as a lot of Board of Elections officials outside directing voters. And they can be identified with blue safety vests and also identification badges. So this space is double the size of our previous early in-person facility. So that has allowed us to maintain the high number of allocation of check-ins stations as well as voting booths, but still keep everything 6 feet apart. So we're following the social distancing outside of the Board of Elections, waiting in line, and inside of the Board of Elections. So we were very fortunate to be able to get that space. I think we've processed as many as 600 voters an hour. So it's really helped reduce the wait time.
When you talk about the extra space, some folks who haven't come down to the Board of Elections for the last few years might not be aware that extra space is in a different location. You are no longer downtown. Let folks know where they can find you now.
Oh, absolutely. So back in January of 2017, the Board of Elections moved from downtown to Norwood. We are right off the Norwood Lateral. We have plenty of free public parking. Our actually in-person early voting numbers have at least doubled every election since we've moved to this location. So voters really like the new facility in Norwood. Downtown, there just wasn't available parking. The building was not as accessible as it should have been to everyone. So we have this great facility now in Norwood, and lots of people are taking advantage of it to come and vote early in person.
That's really important for folks to know, because if in your mind you're still thinking that it's downtown, that's a deterrent to getting down to vote. If you were going to do early voting, or if you were going to deliver your absentee ballot in person, instead of mailing it, it's easy to get deterred when you think, oh, I have to go downtown, I have to park, I have to find my way through. It's not there anymore. It's in Norwood. It's easy parking. That's really great that that happened in 2017, well in advance of needing all this extra space for this year's election, because I saw a press release this morning with some numbers on what early and absentee voting is looking like this year compared to previous years. What does that look like?
Yes, we are breaking all records. We have already had 52,000 people vote early in person at the Board of Elections. That's just since October 6th. To put that in perspective, in the last two past presidential elections, I think the most we ever saw was 27,000. And that was over the entire election cycle of early in-person voting. So we're definitely breaking records there. The same goes with those that are requesting ballots by mail. We've had about 179,000 people request by mail ballots. Again, that breaks all records. I think in a presidential, the most we've come close to that was about 95,000 vote by mail ballots. So almost double. And voters are returning those ballots at a record pace too, which is great. That's a really good thing. The quicker we get those ballots voted and returned to the Board of Elections, the quicker count we'll all have on election night.
So if folks have, and like you said, you already have a lot of those back. Folks that still have their absentee ballot and they're deciding where and how they're going to return it. There are a couple things they can do, and there's a couple things they absolutely should not do. Can you make sure we know what to do with our absentee ballots?
Absolutely. Voters can have the post office return it. They can mail their absentee ballot and have it returned to the Board of Elections. And we have been working very closely with our local postmaster, our regional branch manager, the folks down at the Dalton Street plant. We've been working very closely. They've been doing a really good job at moving this mail. So voters can take advantage of that. Or if they'd like, they can drive their voted ballot to the Board of Elections in Norwood. We have a 24/7 drive-up drop box, so voters do not even need to get out of the car. I will note that during peak voting hours, the line for the drop box is high, so we actually created a ballot collection site right across the street from the Board of Elections. There's plenty of signage and traffic police to guide the voters if they're coming to drop off their ballot to the collection site. It's bipartisan election officials that were hired to do this. They have a sort of a canvas blue ballot bag that we're using that's sealed, that they're using to drop their ballots in. So this is also making it very convenient for voters that they don't have to even get out of their car. But again, they can even drop off their ballot at 3 a.m. if they choose through our secure 24-hour drop box. I will note that only a voter or a voter's family member can return that voted ballot. So, you cannot return, your neighbors down the street or anything like that. It has to be the voter or a member of the voter's family.
That's important to know. Don't go up and down the street and collect everyone's absentee ballots. That's not going to work. But that's because you've already put so many protections into place. And these are attended spots. These are bipartisan attended spots. So a lot of times there are things being shared to alarm people. And I think that's why I really want to make sure that folks get to hear what's happening in Hamilton County and what you have done already. You didn't wait to react to these kind of stories. You already had things in place to make sure voters felt good about returning their ballots. And that makes me think of another thing. And of course, I guess I'll just say, if you're getting your information about the polls from Facebook memes, there's a really high chance you're getting misinformation. And the Hamilton County Board of Elections has a very informative website, and one section of that website is myths. So rather than cover them all here, I'll say, go to the Hamilton County Board of Elections website and just read all the myths. And you'll find out what's relevant to our Board of Elections and what's happening here, not what some meme someone in California is sharing just because it's fun. But one of those things is about being turned away from your polls. And I think people will misinterpret that if they go to the wrong precinct and a poll worker tries to send them to the right precinct. So I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about why we need to be in the right precinct and how that happens to make sure voters are ready for that.
Sure, absolutely. So yes, voters are assigned to a precinct based on where they live. And then that precinct is assigned to a polling location. Some polling locations only have one precinct housed at the location. Others will have multiples. In Hamilton County, the largest we have is 4 precincts to any one polling location. And there's a specific ballot for each precinct. And it's important for the voter to vote the ballot that's associated with their precinct. And that's because it has the contests on the ballot that affects their precinct. So, the tax levy that's in their community, in their precinct, the candidates that will represent their precinct. So it's very important that they receive the correct ballot so that they're voting on the candidates and issues that directly affect them. Occasionally, a voter will come to the wrong polling location, a polling location where their precinct is not assigned. It's one of the reasons why poll workers ask every voter to please announce their name and address. when they come in to vote, so that we can confirm we have the correct address for the voter in our system and that they're coming to the correct precinct and polling location. If that's not the case, the voter will, the poll worker will redirect the voter to the correct location and letting them know. Vast majority of the time, the voters have no problem, going to that location. It's usually not far from the location they stopped at. But that's why it's so important to listen to the poll worker, and voters can find out where their polling location is now. And they should do that before Election Day. They can go to our website and track the, click on the polling location button. It'll pop right up when they put their address in. And the Board of Elections also sent a notice to every registered voter in Hamilton County a couple of weeks ago, letting them know their assigned polling location for November. So voters should make sure to confirm that before election morning.
So I that's important because sometimes we got that postcard and didn't look at it because it was a month or two ago and we didn't really look. But that's another reason to go to the website. Go to the Board of Elections website for Hamilton County, and you can find out before you go, and then the poll worker won't have to send you to another precinct because you'll have already looked it up. And also, if you've requested an absentee ballot, you can track that. You can look at a sample ballot, and actually this kind of leads to my next question. When you look at that sample ballot, we're all thinking about one race at the top right now that we're ready to fill in. We're all really ready to fill in one race at the top, or we're not, one or the other. But your ballot, and the reason you're voting in your precinct, is because there are so many other races and issues. Depending on where you live, it may be a school levy, it may be an emergency service levy, it may be council members, it may be just depending on what year you're voting. And so those are the things you want to be in your precinct so that you're voting for those people in your neighborhood. And those are the races. If you're feeling really disillusioned about what happens on a really big scale, like, oh, I don't feel like my vote makes a difference when we're voting for president, look at those local races, because that affects, those are the people making decisions about what's in your neighborhood. What happens when you leave your front door is more to do with those other people on the ballot. And just a few votes can make a difference. There have been examples in Hamilton County of just a few votes making a difference in those races. Can you think of any of those specifically?
It tends to happen more often in odd year elections when the types of contests that are on the ballot are much smaller districts. But we've even had some contests where it's been a tie. Those are usually your local precinct executives of the political parties, but it has happened where they end up in a tie, and our remedy for that is to flip a coin when that happens. But I do recall a countywide election about 10 years ago where there were well over 200,000 ballots cast in election, and the difference came down to 23 votes. So every vote matters.
So if you really want to know if your vote counts, it counts. 23 people who didn't feel like going that day would have made the difference in that particular race. Now when we talk about going in person to the polls, we know there are some rules. We know, and of course they're all on the website. We know that we cannot be coming in with campaign material, and that campaign material can include a shirt that says, vote for so-and-so. But this year people have new things printed, thanks to COVID. Some people have campaign masks. Can you talk about what are the rules for those in the polling places?
Sure. So campaigning inside the polling place and within 100 feet outside the polling place is prohibited under Ohio law. So no one can wear something, any type of attire or other campaign garb that has the candidate's name, a political party's name, or if it supports a question or issue or opposes a question or issue. None of that type of material, even if it's a mask, is allowed in the polling place. We have acquired additional disposable masks. So if a voter does come to the polling place and they have a mask on that has that type of campaign information on the mask, they will be offered one of our plain generic disposable masks.
That's really good to know, because this again is something you can plan for ahead of time, just like finding out your precinct ahead of time, and that prevents some problems. Grab, we all have them hung in our car, right? So that we can grab a mask. That's so creative that people printed those masks this year, but don't grab that one when you go to vote for that candidate that you've been campaigning for, just to make things easier. But it's good to know you have some backups there. So also don't be surprised if you forget and just grab that mask. The poll worker will have that backup there.
Yes,
that's really good to know. So after we talk about all of this, how to get in and how to get our ballot counted, when will we know the results? Will they be harder to count this year because of this? The volume has about doubled from what we usually see just with early voting, right?
Absolutely. And, election night is an unofficial count. So I think that's important to know. That's one of our myth busters that you talked about earlier. A lot of people don't realize that election night is an unofficial count. The official count occurs 14 to 21 days after Election Day. In this case, actually, the Secretary of State is requiring all boards of elections to certify on or before November 18th. So we will have results by November 18th. So, and why does that happen? I think it's important to note. So election night, the unofficial count contains all of the votes that were cast at the polling place on Election Day, the early in-person votes, and all absentee by mail ballots that were received at the Board of Elections by 7:30 p.m. on November 3rd. Now, when we count election night, we'll talk a little bit about that first. The polls close at 7:30 p.m. So at 7:31 p.m., we basically hit the tabulate button for all those early in-person and vote by mail ballots we had processed up until that time. And then we post that on our website and out to the world. We expect that first report to be issued right around 8 p.m. Then we'll have intermittent reports throughout the night, and those will include the precinct results coming in from the polling locations throughout Hamilton County. We anticipate they'll also will contain additional vote by mail ballots because when those ballots late afternoon on Election Day all the way up until 7:30, we need a little time to verify the ballots, determine the eligibility, and then count them. So we think throughout the night it'll be both additional absentee ballots will be added to the count as well as the precincts. It's really difficult to determine and predict when we're going to finish that count election night. I can tell you no one wants that count to be finished more than the bipartisan election officials at the board. But our main concern is accuracy. Our focus is making sure that every eligible vote is counted accurately and securely, and we will never trade that for speed. So bear with us because we are making sure every eligible ballot is counted accurately and securely. Historically in presidentials, it's usually after midnight before we finish. I don't think this one will be any different. In the wee early morning hours of November 4th, we will have results. And then what happens after that is we are canvassing and leading up to the official certified results on November 18th. It's important in Ohio to know that we don't add ballots to the count throughout the process. There's just one additional count that'll occur 14 days later in Hamilton County. What we're doing in that 14 days is we're verifying ballots that come in after Election Day. Absentee ballots that are postmarked on or before November 2nd and arrive at the board by November 13th can be added to the official count. And then those ballots that were cast provisionally at the polling places, we're verifying that information, and those eligible will be added in one additional count, the official results on November 18th. I hope that. I know it's a long explanation, but I think it's a lot of things voters are not always aware of.
Actually, that covers several of the other questions that I had next, is that there's different kinds of ballots. And I think there's a lot of misinformation about what happens with those kinds. And one of them is absentee ballots that come later. So it's good to know that if they're postmarked but didn't get there on election day, there is still another window. Your vote will count. And the provisional ballots. There's a lot of misinformation about what a provisional ballot is for and if it counts. And I think it's important for people to hear that is part of the counting process. But with both the absentees and the provisionals, you need to verify them before you count them, which is important to know. And we're hearing so much about what will count and what will not count and what will people try to get in. It's that verification process is really important.
Absolutely. And it's one, that obviously it's very important. It's a very tedious process, but we have uniform guidelines throughout the state. And, again, this isn't new to us. This is something that's been around in Ohio for, well over a decade. And so the processes have been tried. The plans and the procedures are all in place. And this is what we do every election, whether it's the presidential election or a small little, tax levy special election that might only have 500 voters. It's the same processes for every election.
I actually, that's a good time for people to note that if you're noticing voting and election season this year, because there's a lot more noise about it, be aware there will be things to vote for next year. Whatever the outcome of this election is, there will be things that affect your neighborhood on a ballot. I don't know what they are yet, but I know people are already thinking about what they are. And be aware of this process. And it's great that there's all this increased awareness right now about the importance of voting. And I would love to see that carry over into other years and say, now I'm registered for the first time or re-registered for the first time in ages because I haven't voted in 20 years or, whatever gets people back to the process is fantastic, especially if that keeps them involved in the process. So is there anything else you would really like voters to know this week?
I think you've covered everything. You've done a really good job.
Well, I really appreciate your willingness to take some time today to speak with us to make sure we can share this with Hamilton County. And I wish you, I know you have a very busy next couple of weeks ahead of you. So I really do appreciate this extra time to just stop for a minute and let us know how these things are working.
Absolutely. I just want to remind people to follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please follow us. We're pushing out good, truthful information to the voters every day through those platforms.
Yes, excellent point. And again, I'll just say it again. If you're getting your voting information from a meme that is not accurate sources, go right to the source. So we mentioned the website. Also, follow their social media. They're putting the right information right on their social media. You can click share on that one. That's the one to click share on.
Yes, thank you very much. Good message.
Thank you very much. Well, I thank you again for being willing to do this, and I look forward to talking to you in the future about other things and other elections, and I'm excited that the new location has been so conducive to this election, and I just really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for helping me to get the truthful information out about elections.
And thank you for watching County Fair on Waycross Community Media. That means you are planning to be an informed voter who is ready with all the information they need, whether they're voting at the polls on November 3rd, or they are voting absentee ballot or early voting in person. Make sure you get all your information at the Board of Elections website for Hamilton County, and we will see you at the polls.